book lovers, it is G-Swizz here, and I'm here today to talk about some reimaginings slash retellings that I would recommend. If you didn't know, this is a 7 on Sunday topic, and I'm the host of 7 on Sunday. I will link the Goodreads page down in the description where you can check it out, and you can participate in a topic in the future, or you can suggest a topic. And this week's 7 on Sunday topic is a follow-up to a 7 on Sunday topic we did before. We did the Halloween-inspired 7 on Sunday topics for October. I wanted to do these like back-to-back at some point, but I thought it might be good to spread it out a little bit to at least hopefully give myself some time to gather this list up, or maybe give the participants some time to also compile this list as well. I am very much into fairy tale reimaginings and retellings. I mean, there are a few retellings I've read, and the majority of the recommendations list that I have today will be fairy tale inspired. And even though there are some other reimaginings that I've read previously that I absolutely adore, I have personally decided not to put them on this list because I don't really know much about the original source material. The perfect example of this is the War of Lost Hearts series by Carissa Broadbent. Apparently, according to a few reviewers, the War of Lost Hearts series is a Spartacus reimagining, but it's gender flipped, I believe. I would 100% recommend that series if you haven't checked it out yet. It is my favorite series I've read this year so far. However, I decided not to put it on this list because I barely know anything about Spartacus, and I have not done my research there. So as much as I would recommend it as a book series, I personally would not recommend it as a retelling or reimagining, if that makes sense. Whereas with the books that I've selected for this recommendations video today, I know a little bit more about the source material. Even though I haven't deliberately read the source material, I think that the stories and the fairy tales these books are inspired by, I just know a little bit more. So I've just decided to just stick to what I know, essentially. I've got a fair few on this list today, and I do want to continue to read more fairy tale retellings and reimaginings, and I received a few recommendations after my TBR video, and I truly appreciate it. I'm always welcoming more fairy tale reimaginings, especially, but just reimaginings in general, because I totally want to get to know these myths and legends even more through stories that are inspired by them. So I guess without further ado, let's get straight into this recommendations list. These are retellings and reimaginings I would personally recommend, and yeah, they might be really hyped here, but this is just me wanting to give a personal endorsement and go through why I absolutely love these and would recommend them. I'm going to start off with a recommendation that isn't necessarily a fairy tale. It's actually quite a bleak tale because it was inspired by gothic fiction. That, my friends, is a Dracula reimagining, and the one I have to recommend is obviously A Dowy of Blood by S.T. Gibson. I'm pretty sure a lot of you know, if you've watched my channel for this last year, that I love this book. This was my first 5 out of 5 star read this year. I adore A Dowy of Blood, and I think out of all the retellings and reimaginings I have to recommend on this list today, this one is definitely the most dark, and this one is a survivor story, and it is inspired by Dracula and his brides. That being said, this Dracula doesn't have a name because Constanza, our protagonist, decides not to name her abuser. And I very much appreciate Constanza telling her story because this entire book is about her taking her power back and taking her voice back. And I totally appreciate A Dowy of Blood for that. I'm not gonna lie. A Dowy of Blood has given me really high expectations for any other Dracula reimagining out there. As of recently, I tried to pick up like 1 or 2 things that were also inspired by Dracula, and unfortunately they pale in comparison to A Dowy of Blood for me. I don't know, I feel like this book really just changed my life for the better. Then again, it ruined me for other tastes. And it is not common that a book will do that for me, but the fact that A Dowy of Blood did that, that's just absolutely incredible. It's not a very long book. I believe it's under 300 pages. I'll check my Fairy Loot edition because this is the traditionally published edition. Yeah, no, it is literally 292 pages. It is an under 300 page book. It's also a very quick audio listen as well. I did listen to the audiobook one of my reads through this book, and I loved the performance. The performance is spot on. I definitely do recommend this story if you're wanting a really good Dracula reimagining, or really a reimagining that focuses on Dracula's brides, because oh my goodness, at least in this version of the story, they went through a lot, and I just really appreciate survival stories personally. I mean, that is why I read authors like Tiffany Roberts Roberts and Laura Thalassa. And I'm so happy that I can add S.T. Gibson to the list of authors I trust in terms of writing good survival stories. I can't wait to read more by S.T. Gibson. Okay, now we are moving on to fairy tale reimaginings because, yeah, A Dowy of Blood was quite bleak compared to the rest of the list that I have. Here, I'm going to talk about a Mulan reimagining. Some of you might have heard of Spin the Dawn by Elizabeth Lim, but if you haven't, I love this book. Go read it. It's actually Mulan meets Project Runway, because instead of our Mulan-inspired protagonist fighting and going into the military of some sort, they are assigned to be a royal tailor. And I believe in this world only a male can take that place of being a royal tailor. She's taken on the position of either her father or her brother. It's very interesting stuff, and I kind of just like how relaxed this Mulan-esque story was compared to what I imagined it being. I mean, I did like the action that took place within the series eventually, but I just loved the moments where our protagonist was just in the palace doing their thing, trying to hide who they were, trying to hide certain things about themselves, trying to infiltrate the palace, just being themselves. I don't know, there was just something comforting about Spin the Dawn that I appreciated, but I did also like the Mulan-esque elements as well. So if you're wanting something that is a Mulan reimagining, but is very much different from the original story, or at least the original Disney movie, the animated one, which is definitely one of my favorite animated Disney movies, I would definitely recommend Spin the Dawn, because while it was inspired by Mulan, it's definitely very much its own thing, and I was able to go into this book without criticizing it much, because the last time I read something that was Mulan inspired, Flame in the Mist by Renee Ahdieh, I criticized it so much because I was so disappointed in Flame in the Mist compared to the animated Disney version of Mulan. Whereas with Spin the Dawn, I was able to see this as its own individual story, but appreciate where it took inspiration from Mulan. So I would definitely recommend this one if you're wanting something that is fresh, but also feels somewhat familiar and feels comforting in a way. But speaking of Mulan reimaginings, this manga wasn't necessarily pitched originally as a Mulan reimagining, but I get the vibes, and it kind of reminds me of Spin the Dawn. I know this isn't necessarily a comp titles video, but if it was, I would say if you loved Spin the Dawn, and if you've read that already, try The King's Beast by Ray Toma. I adore The King's Beast. I'm currently in the middle of reading it. It very much gives me Spin the Dawn vibes. Except in this Mulan-esque reimagining, we're following a protagonist who is trying to infiltrate the palace by pretending that she is a male, because only males can serve royals in this world. At least of her race, she is an Aegean, who are essentially these human-cat hybrids. She's technically what is known as the King's Beast in this story, but she is serving a royal, pretending to be a male, because all female Aegean are destined to be female slaves. That's not great. It's not great at all. But she wants to discover how her brother was assassinated, and in the hopes to do that, she disguises as a male so that she can serve royals, and in the process, she kind of starts falling in love with a prince, and a prince starts falling in love with her, and he doesn't even know that she is female. He falls in love with the person she is, and oh, it's so cute. I love it so much. Yeah, there's action in the story, but just like Spin the Dawn, it very much feels cozy. I just love to see the slow burn so much, and I'm hoping that this series will take a direction where our protagonist will eventually rule and reign, and all Aegean and human can become equal in this world. Because it's just really sad to see how the Aegean are treated in this story, because yeah, it's just not cool for any of them to be slaves. It just has so much heart. The story is just so cute, and it very much reminds me of Mulan at times because of the female in disguise elements and the infiltration elements and the little love story that the two characters have between them, except it's much more wholesome than Mulan. But I can definitely say with full confidence it was probably inspired by Mulan, but it very much reminds me of Spin the Dawn. So I would recommend this Mulan-esque story to those who love Spin the Dawn and who are wanting something that is very much different from the Mulan movie but contains elements of the original Mulan story. And the next fairy tale reimagining that I have to recommend is a Cinderella reimagining, and the Cinderella reimagining I have to recommend today is Heart of the Raven Prince by Tessandra Odette. This is the second book in the Entangled with Fae series. They don't need to be read in order, but I would highly recommend you do read them in order. The first book in this series is actually a Beauty and the Beast reimagining, and I do like that one, but surprisingly enough, I actually enjoy the fairy tales that Tessandra Odette has reimagined that aren't necessarily my key favorite. So I have another one I have to recommend after this within this series. This entire series, the Entangled with Fae series, is a fairy tale reimagining series. I just recommend the series in general. However, I have two to recommend from the series. One of them is a Cinderella reimagining. I don't really love the original story of Cinderella that much. I mean, I appreciate the concept of Cinderella because, kind of similarly to A Dowy of Blood, Cinderella is a survival story, except in my personal opinion, because of the fairy tale appeal, it has been packaged as a romance fairy tale when it's definitely more of a survival story. And the romance, I'd have to say, in Cinderella is a bonus. I'm just happy that Cinderella eventually gets out of her terrible situation. But I especially appreciated that in Heart of the Raven Prince because we follow Ember from the first book in the series. Ember is much younger in the first book, which is Curse of the Wolf King, the Beauty and the Beast reimagining. Would recommend you start off with that one first. And then Prince Franco we meet in the Fair Isle trilogy. This is their love story. And I'm so happy that Prince Franco finally got his love story. Yes, I would recommend you read the Fair Isle trilogy first and then you start reading the Entangled with Fae series in publication order. But the Entangled with Fae series are standalone books, so if you want to read them as standalones, like, that's totally fine. But you will appreciate it much more if you go back and you read the Fair Isle trilogy where you meet Prince Franco and Curse of the Wolf King where you meet Ember. Oh, and I'm just so happy that these two were matched because I was waiting for Prince Franco to have his happily ever after in the Fair Isle trilogy. I did not ship him with the character he was potentially going to get with in the Fair Isle trilogy that much. However, I just wanted him to find someone. And this right here is his story, and I'm so happy about that. But this probably means nothing to those who have not read any of Tessandra Odette's books, so I totally get it. I just appreciate how unique this Cinderella reimagining was. It was very much different. It had a different take on the original fairy tale, and most importantly, it did not feel like Cinder in the Lunar Chronicles, because as much as I did appreciate Cinder, the first book felt so predictable. The rest of the Lunar Chronicles got really good. I was actually going to recommend Scarlet in this video, but I just realized that even though I could recommend a sequel in a series, because the sequel just so happens to be like my favorite book in the series, I don't think that that is a good idea. I mean, that comment is kind of rich and ironic considering that I am recommending a sequel, but this is a companion sequel. It can be read as a standalone, okay? Different situation. Scarlet, I love, but Cinder I found to be absolutely predictable. And ever since I read Cinder, I've been kind of scared off of Cinderella reimaginings, and I get it. Throne of Glass is also a Cinderella reimagining, and I enjoyed it, but Heart of the Raven Prince very much restored my hope in Cinderella reimaginings, and it is one I highly recommend because it is very much different from the ones that I've read so far, and it's one that I did not predict. I just love this story so much, and I just want to appreciate the art of these two. Yeah? That's Prince Franco, that's Ember, my two loves. Highly recommend this one if you haven't checked it out yet, or just any of Tessandra Odette's books. And yes, as promised, I have a second recommendation out of the Entangled with Fae series, and that is the fourth book in the Entangled with Fae series, A Taste of Poison. This is a Snow White reimagining, and it is a Snow White reimagining with a twist. This was an instant 5 out of 5 stars for me. I was nervous going into this one because, unlike majority of Tessandra Odette's books, I wasn't a big fan of the Little Mermaid reimagining within the series, Kiss of the Selkie. I really just don't get why that one had to focus on a talent show, but anyway. A Taste of Poison, I thought was gonna be predictable. I'm not a huge Snow White fan. I think what's very interesting with the whole Snow White movie controversy right now is a lot of people are saying, you guys aren't actually Snow White fans, you're just angry and outraged based on the casting and whatnot. And you know what? I don't want to get into the controversy and stuff, but with that comment specifically, I cannot say that they're wrong because I honestly don't think that they're wrong. I personally don't know anyone who has Snow White as their favorite fairy tale. I mean, I could be wrong. I just probably need to get to know my friends better if Snow White happens to be their favorite fairy tale. In fact, if it is your favorite fairy tale, let me know why. I would be curious to know, but I've never gravitated towards Snow White, like ever. I've never really been interested in the story. Like, I loved the movie growing up as a kid, but it was not my favorite. So going into this book, I was very hesitant. I was like, oh, I don't know if this is gonna be like any better than the original, but we will see. I went into the story and this is definitely one of the best books I've read by Tessandra Odette. And that's saying a lot because Tessandra Odette is one of my favorite authors of all time. It's tied with Heart of the Raven Prince. I really don't know which one I love better, but I love A Taste of Poison so much. Oh my goodness, the slow burn, the hate to love dynamic between these two, oh, so good. And and the twists. What I can say here for certain, if you are scared of this book being predictable, I'm just gonna say that it is not as predictable as the original Snow White Disney movie. Let's just say that. I'm just gonna say that. I'm just gonna put that out there. Also, while we're talking about this book, I have to appreciate the fan art again. I mean, oh my goodness, this is so pretty. I love visualizing these two. Yeah, I'm absolutely obsessed with this story, and I kind of want to go back and read this book. I really wish I could wipe my memory of like the first reading experience I had with it and just read it again with fresh eyes, because it was just one of those stories that had my jaw dropping throughout. I was just absolutely blown away by this one. I did not think I would have this much praise for a Snow White reimagining, but it's making me reconsider like whether or not Snow White is like one of my favorite fairy tales now. Even though I don't love the original as much, this book has definitely opened my mind up to the idea of loving the original. And the next fairy tale reimagining that I have to recommend on this list today is one I am pretty sure a lot of you will see coming. I definitely recommend Escaping Wonderland by Tiffany Roberts. This is a standalone monster romance that just so happens to take place in a simulation inspired by Wonderland. At times it's creepy, at times it's bleak. I wouldn't say it's as bleak as A Dowy of Blood, but this is a pretty dark one. But also considering that Tiffany Roberts wrote it, there are gonna be some wholesome moments. There's definitely some wholesome moments in this one. As I'm filming this video right now, I'm currently reading another Tiffany Roberts book, and oh my goodness, I am so in love and so obsessed. I initially was meant to prioritize starting another series, but I just got completely sucked in to a monster alien romance by Tiffany Roberts instead. So yeah, that's just me at the moment. So right now, I'm in a really good mood talking about this one. This was my first Tiffany Roberts book that I read, and it was definitely a book that made me want to read much more by them. But I am also very much curious about this Wonderland world that they set up, because unlike majority of the Alice in Wonderland reimaginings that I know of, this is a sci-fi reimagining. It's very much different from what I expected, and I initially thought our love interest here was the Mad Hatter because he's wearing a hat, but I did not notice his tail when I first saw this cover. It's actually the Cheshire Cat. Yeah, this is a romance between Alice and the Cheshire Cat in a monster-human hybrid form. And I found the story to be thrilling in some parts, and I found it to be wholesome in some parts, and I really liked how things wrapped up. However, in my personal opinion, this could have been a trilogy. Just putting it out there. That's just me. It's probably my favorite Wonderland reimagining I've read so far. I can't recall reading too many Wonderland reimaginings over the years. I know a lot of readers at the time that I was a teenager were reading Splintered by A.G. Howard, which was a reimagining I never got into. And then again, I did watch Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. Maybe I'm mistaking that for a YA novel because it's just vivid. I honestly cannot recall whether or not I've read many Alice in Wonderland reimaginings, and maybe I might in the future. However, what I do know is that Escaping Wonderland is going to be really hard to top if I ever get into Alice in Wonderland reimaginings, because I really enjoyed this one. I really love the concept. I think that Tiffany Roberts did an excellent job crafting the story, and I really love the happily ever after for this character. And honestly, so far, I do appreciate that all the ones that I've read so far have been survivors of abusive relationships, and they all find their happily ever afters. I swear to God, Tiffany Roberts knows how to write a good happy ending for characters who definitely deserve it. You'll get that in Escaping Wonderland. You'll get that in majority of Tiffany Roberts books. I mean, I don't know about all of them so far. I'm still like working my way through the backlist, but I can count on it based on my experience. The second last fairy tale reimagining that I have to recommend today, I cannot find my physical copy of. I think I've buried it somewhere in my library, and I just honestly cannot find it. I'm really devastated I can't find it because I love the cover so much. But post-production G-Swizz will have to just insert the cover on the screen. Master of Crows by Grace Draven. This is a standalone Beauty and the Beast reimagining. In fact, the last two I have to recommend today are Beauty and the Beast reimaginings, because what else did you expect from me? I mean, I could recommend more. I really could recommend more, but I restrained myself. I limited myself to 2, okay? Eventually, I will do a full video talking about all the Beauty and the Beast reimaginings or Beauty and the Beast inspired stories that I recommend. But right now, I'm just gonna limit it to 2. Grace Draven actually, apparently, according to her readership, specializes in Beauty and the Beast inspired stories. I did see some Beauty and the Beast elements within the Wraith King series by Grace Draven, but this right here, Master of Crows, is specifically a Beauty and the Beast reimagining. I still have not yet read Entreat Me, but I cannot wait to read that one because, once again, Beauty and the Beast reimaginings, just like, I need them. I need to inject them all into my veins. But as long as they're good, because I don't want terrible ones. I really don't. I don't need another Curse So Dark and Lonely family. I don't need another ACOTAR first book, ACOTAR. I just don't need them. I don't need the terrible ones. So if you're gonna recommend me one, don't recommend me one with a terrible beast, okay? But anyway, Master of Crows is the ultimate beautiful, grumpy sunshine story that you can expect from a Beauty and the Beast reimagining. It is the perfect standalone novel. As much as I would like more books with these two characters for the sake of their wholesome relationship and their back and forth, I very much appreciated that this standalone story was very much fleshed out and the slow burn was there. Grace Draven crafted this Beauty and the Beast inspired story so perfectly. I am so impressed. This was one of my favorite books of last year, and I do have to say it, I don't know whether or not I prefer this book over Wraith Kings, but I kind of think I do, only because this book has kind of stuck with me even more, and it honestly restored my faith in Beauty and the Beast reimaginings. As I just mentioned, I was burnt with a few very popular ones, but I'm really happy that there are some authors out there who really know how to write a good Beauty and the Beast reimagining, and Grace Draven, in my personal opinion, is one of them. I have no doubt that I will love Entreat Me, and I can't wait to read more books from her. I would definitely recommend this book if you have not yet read it, if you're wanting a really good standalone Beauty and the Beast story. The next recommendation I'm going to give is not a standalone, so if you're wanting the shorter option out of the two, I would recommend Master of Crows. This one does the trick very well. And last but certainly not least, I'm pretty sure a lot of you will expect me to recommend the Deliciously Dark Fairy Tale series by K.F. Breene. This was initially my favorite book series of the year. Unfortunately, yes, it has been dethroned by The War of Lost Hearts, the book series I mentioned earlier that is a Spartacus reimagining. And look, I know nothing about Spartacus, okay? I had no idea that that was a reimagining going into it, nor did I know it was a reimagining while I purchased it. I literally just purchased those books because of the covers. Anyway, that's a tangent, getting off the point. That just so happens to be my favorite book series of the year. This, however, is a very close one. I'd have to say, out of the two series, this one definitely made me laugh the most. Even though the War of Lost Hearts series was a very touching read, that book series made me cry a lot more than it made me laugh. However, the Deliciously Dark Fairy Tale series by K.F. Breene made me laugh so much. I did have some moments where I did cry because the characters in this book series did go through a lot. However, what I do appreciate about the Deliciously Dark Fairy Tale series is how they are able to find humor in the dark moments. What happens in this book series is really dark, but K.F. Breene's signature humor absolutely steals the show. It makes the series feel less bleak than what it is, and they are in some bleak situations. Like, oh my goodness, I do not envy some of the characters going through what they're going through in this book series, but K.F. Breene was able to write the story in a very entertaining way, and I truly appreciate that. Beauty and the Beast reimaginings happen to be my favorite because Beauty and the Beast is my favorite fairy tale, so I found comfort in the story not just because I found K.F. Breene's writing style and humor to be absolutely comforting, and I found these characters to be comforting, but there were aspects of the story that felt familiar to me. And Nifane, oh my goodness, okay, like look, I will always be praising my boy Nifane, but he is probably the sweetest beast I have ever read about. I mean, look, I loved the Beast and Master of Crows, but he was a tough nut to crack. Nifane, however, is just a sweetie. I have a few fictional boyfriends from this year, but Nifane, he is like close to being number one. I mean, he at the moment is competing with Maxentarius from The War of Lost Hearts and Tiago from the Dark Court Rising series, but Nifane, oh my goodness, I think out of all three of them is kind of like the sweetest in a way. No, I don't know. I really don't know. Okay, it's really hard to compare fictional boys, okay, especially when they're written very well. Like, I've read a few fictional boys that have been written very well this year, and I do appreciate that, because if I find a fictional love interest that I don't like, then, you know, you won't hear the end of it, really. Like, I'm still talking about Prince Rafferty to this day, and it's been like 3 years since I read the Revenant Chronicles. It's been some time. Yeah, and you're still hearing about it. Whereas Nifane, like, he's perfect. And I very much appreciate the care that K.F. Breene put into this Beauty and the Beast reimagining. Even though it's not technically the same story as Beauty and the Beast, it's definitely a looser reimagining, kind of similar to how, like, Spin the Dawn is a looser reimagining of Mulan. However, K.F. Breene handled the Belle-like character and the Beast-like character very well in the story, and I appreciate that. I do have to say, though, if you are a fan of Gaston, you will kind of be a little bit disappointed by the Gaston-like character in the story. Yeah, he was just a coward. He was just, ugh. And he wasn't even a big villain, you know? I was kind of expecting him to be the big bad. I do have to warn you guys now, he's not the big bad. So there's that. That all being said, I loved the loose elements. I loved the story. It felt like a paranormal romance over a fantasy romance, and that's why I would also recommend it to those who love paranormal romance, because it was kind of written in the way that a paranormal romance is written, except in a high fantasy world. Yeah, so I recommend it for all sorts of reasons. This is definitely my favorite full series on this list. I would definitely recommend it if you're wanting a good read that will consume your life, and if you are looking forward to potential spin-offs, because KF Brain has teased that there are gonna be some spin-offs, and I'm living for it. So I guess it's gonna be it for this video today, book lovers. If you happen to stay to the end of the video, leave me the pink heart emoji with the sparkles, and if you happen to enjoy this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet already. Join the amazing community of book lovers. And also I have social medias. I'm at GSwizzleBooks on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm also Goodreads. That's www.goodreads.com/GSwizzle. And finally, I'm at TikTok. I'm at GSwizzle on TikTok if you want to follow me there for some bookish content. I love you, book lovers, and I will see you later. Peace.
How did I weigh half when I flipped it in a double? How did I weigh half when I flipped it in a double?